Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking at a pretty wild scenario. What happens when a group of idealists set out to build a free, open source artificial intelligence to, protect all of humanity, but then they realize they need $1 billion just to keep the lights on?
Yeah, well, you end up with a trail of secret diaries, a bitter lawsuit from a Silicon Valley billionaire, and an actual geopolitical standoff playing out right this second.
Right. It's crazy. I'm so glad you're joining us for this because our mission today is to completely unravel this high-stakes battle for the control of AI. We are looking at how it went from a philanthropic endeavor into literally the ultimate geopolitical bargaining chip.
And the stack of sources we're synthesizing for you today is just incredible. We've got the recent federal court documents from January 2026.
Specifically, the rulings in Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI.
Exactly. And we're pairing that legal paper trail with a June 2025 economic report from Mitsui detailing the U.S.-China semiconductor rivalry.
Which is a huge piece of this puzzle.
It really is. And finally, to bring the stakes into real time, we're tracking live reporting from today, Thursday, May 14th, 2026, covering a massive summit happening right now in Beijing between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
It is just an absolutely wild cast of characters. I mean, we've got tech titans keeping private journals, the most powerful hardware on Earth, and a global trade war. But before we get into the mechanisms of how this all works, we do need to set a ground rule for the discussion today.
Right. Very important. Because our sources involve highly charged political figures, ongoing legal battles, and global superpowers, we want to make it absolutely clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides.
No sides at all.
Right. We are not endorsing any left-wing or right-wing political viewpoints. We are strictly here to impartially report and analyze the facts contained in the source material provided.
Perfect. So let's start at the very foundation of the AI boom. Because this isn't just a story about writing code, it's an ideological war over who actually controls the tech. And the curtain really gets pulled back in this January 2026 court ruling. This was a federal judge denying OpenAI's motion to dismiss Musk's lawsuit.
Yeah, and to understand the crux of that lawsuit, you really have to look at the initial funding. So between 2016 and 2020, Elon Musk donated roughly $38 million to OpenAI.
That's a lot of money.
It is. And the core tension is about the fundamental premise of that money. When OpenAI was founded in 2015, its written charter explicitly stated it would be a nonprofit, open-source entity.
Because they were terrified of a giant tech company like Google owning it.
Exactly. The founders agreed that their work to build artificial general intelligence, or AGI, would not be organized for private corporate gain.
They wanted to build a machine that could outsmart humans but keep it out of a corporate vault. So Musk was funding this through what are called donor-advised funds, or DAFs. He was basically operating under the assumption that this was a charity for the future of humanity.
But then we hit 2017. Inside OpenAI, the founders, including Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, are hitting a massive wall. Yeah. They realize that building AGI isn't just a handful of guys coding in a garage. It requires an astronomical amount of something called compute.
Right, compute. And let's clarify what compute actually means here, because people throw that word around a lot. I mean, they don't just mean buying a few really nice laptops.
Oh, far from it. Compute refers to the raw processing power required to train an AI model. You need warehouses filled with thousands of specialized microchips running matrix multiplications trillions of times a second for months on end.
It's massive scale.
Exactly. It draws so much electricity you practically need your own power plant. Buying and running that hardware costs billions of dollars. And you simply cannot raise that kind of capital through traditional philanthropic donations.
So they hit this huge financial roadblock. And this is where the court documents read like a literal thriller. Because you have this stark contrast between what Altman and Brockman are telling Musk to his face and what they're writing down behind closed doors.
Right, the internal communications.
Yeah. Musk gets frustrated in late 2017. He issues an ultimatum demanding they commit to staying a nonprofit, or he's pulling his funding. Sam Altman emails him back the very next day.
And the email states, quote, "I remain enthusiastic about the nonprofit structure."
Enthusiastic. I love that word choice. But the discovery process, where lawyers dig through all the internal emails, unearthed Greg Brockman's private notes.
Yeah, the legal filings actually refer to it as his diary.
And the entries are a complete 180 from that email. Around that same time, Brockman writes, "This is the only chance we have to get out from Elon."
Wow.
And then he writes the question, financially, what will take me to $1 billion?
I mean, a focus on $1 billion is a massive departure from a philanthropic charter.
Totally.
But the most damaging entry in the diary is a realization Brockman documents after an internal meeting. He acknowledges that they can't continue to tell Musk they are committed to the nonprofit structure while secretly mapping out a transition to a for-profit company.
Because that would be lying.
He literally writes in his own notes that doing so would be, quote, a lie and morally bankrupt.
Oh, man. Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the legal argument here. It sounds like Musk used his donor-advised fund to put millions into a public trust. Like, let's say he's funding a beautiful free national park for the public.
Okay, good analogy.
And then he discovers the caretakers of the park quietly transferred the land titles to themselves, fenced off the whole park, and built a hyper-profitable, toll-gated theme park on the exact same spot.
That is precisely the narrative Musk's legal team presented to the court. It's essentially an allegation of breach of charitable trust and fraud.
So how did OpenAI defend that?
Well, their defense rested on a technicality regarding how the money was given. Because Musk used donor-advised funds, he technically surrendered legal ownership of the money to fund managers, like Fidelity or Vanguard.
Oh, to get an immediate tax deduction.
Exactly. So OpenAI argued that because it wasn't technically his money anymore, he lacked the legal standing to sue them at all.
Wow. But the judge threw that argument out, right, saying Musk retained a special interest as the founder of those funds.
Right.
But here's where I'm a little confused. Musk stopped paying them back in September 2020. If he was so suspicious, why is this legal battle exploding right now in 2026?
That's a great question.
Doesn't the clock run out on suing someone after a certain number of years?
OpenAI's lawyers argued exactly that. They said the statute of limitations had expired, but in corporate law, there's a mechanism called the discovery rule.
The discovery rule.
Yeah, the clock doesn't start ticking when the alleged fraud occurs. It starts when the victim discovers, or reasonably should have discovered, the true extent of the deception.
Ah, I see.
So Musk's argument, which the court found compelling enough to allow the case to proceed, is that OpenAI executed this pivot by degrees. The court documents suggest they kept him in the dark about the massive scale of the for-profit pivot until their mega deals became public in 2023.
Which sets up the timeline perfectly. Why did OpenAI risk alienating their biggest donor and inviting a massive lawsuit? We go back to that word, compute.
Exactly. They needed billions to buy hardware.
Right. They needed a backer with incredibly deep pockets. Enter Microsoft.
Yes. So in 2019, OpenAI announces this complex corporate restructuring. They create OpenAI LP, a for-profit subsidiary. And crucially, they figured out a way to transfer substantially all of their intellectual property and their employees out of the nonprofit and into this new for-profit entity.
But they tried to soften the blow to the public. They didn't call it a standard corporation. They called it a capped profit model.
Right. They pitched it as a safety mechanism. They claimed investors would receive a capped return, ensuring that the mission of building safe AGI remained the priority over infinite profit.
Sounds reasonable on the surface.
Until you look at the unredacted court documents.
Yeah.
They reveal that this profit cap was set, quote, north of $250 billion.
Okay, wait. A cap of $250 billion? I mean, is that actually a functional cap that protects a nonprofit mission? That's like telling me I have a strict cap on how many pizzas I am legally allowed to eat, but the cap is set at 10,000 pizzas.
That's a great way to put it.
Mathematically, it just doesn't matter. I will never hit the cap before the outcome is completely realized.
And that is the exact argument Musk is making. If a cap is set so astronomically high that no investor will realistically reach it before the technology fundamentally alters the global economy, it operates exactly like a traditional uncapped for-profit company.
And Microsoft clearly saw the financial upside. Their investments escalated at just an unprecedented rate.
Absolutely. They put in $1 billion in 2019, $2 billion in 2021, $10 billion in 2023, and another $750 million in late 2024.
And it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Microsoft gets exclusive licenses to build OpenAI's models into all their software, and OpenAI gets unfettered access to Microsoft's massive cloud computing data centers. But what really blew my mind in the source material is that even inside Microsoft, the top executives knew this was ethically murky from the start.
Yeah, the legal discovery process pulled up a fascinating internal email from 2018. It was written by Microsoft's Chief Technology Officer, Kevin Scott.
What did he say?
He was evaluating OpenAI's long-term plans. And he wrote to CEO Satya Nadella, quote, I wonder if the big OpenAI donors are aware of these plans. Ideologically, I can't imagine that they funded an open effort so that they could then go build a closed for-profit thing on its back.
Wow. He called it. 8 years before the judge ruled on the case, Microsoft's own CTO saw the exact foundation of the lawsuit.
He saw the whole thing coming.
So Microsoft pours tens of billions of dollars into OpenAI, but that money doesn't just sit in a bank account. It is immediately converted into physical hardware.
Right, the chips.
Exactly. And that hardware is the centerpiece of a global turf war, which brings us to the Mitsui Economic Report from late 2025.
Yes. All those billions went toward buying the most advanced AI chips on the market, specifically from Nvidia. These chips have become so incredibly powerful that they aren't even viewed as commercial electronics anymore.
What are they viewed as?
They're treated as critical national security assets, much like weapon systems or uranium.
That is wild. The Mitsui report outlines this geopolitical chess match between the U.S. and China over these specific chips.
Right.
Under the Biden administration, the U.S. strategy was nicknamed Small Yard High Fence. It was a near-total embargo on sending the most advanced AI chips to China.
But then things changed.
Yeah, the current Trump administration shifted that policy in late 2025. They decided to allow the export of NVIDIA's top-tier chip, the H200, to China. But they attached some massive strings.
And to understand why the strings were attached, you really have to understand the hardware gap. The performance of these AI chips is measured in something called PFLOPS.
Okay, what is that?
It stands for peta floating point operations per second. A floating point operation is essentially a complex mathematical calculation. Peta means a quadrillion.
A quadrillion.
Yeah. So the NVIDIA H200 operates at 2.0 PFLOPS, meaning it can perform 2 quadrillion calculations every single second.
That is almost impossible to comprehend. 2 quadrillion a second.
It's staggering. And compare that to China's domestic alternative. Because of the U.S. embargo, China has been scrambling to build their own chips. Their current flagship is the Huawei Ascend 910C, which operates at just 0.80 PFLOPS.
So the American chip is more than twice as fast.
Exactly. And in the AI arms race, if your hardware is half as fast, your model takes twice as long to train. If your competitor trains a new AI in 3 months and it takes you 6, you are permanently stuck a generation behind.
But the hardware speed is only half the trap, right? I was fascinated by the explanation of Satya in the report.
Oh yeah, Satya is massive.
Because NVIDIA doesn't just sell the physical chip. They own a software platform called Satya, which is basically the foundational coding language that all AI developers use.
Think of CUDA like a spoken language. If an entire generation of developers spends 10 years writing all their underlying software libraries in French, you can just hand them a German dictionary and expect them to keep working at the same speed.
That makes perfect sense.
Right, so if Chinese tech companies build their AI systems on the CUDA platform, their software is permanently optimized for NVIDIA chips. If they ever want to switch to a domestically produced Chinese chip, they can't just hit a translate button.
They'd have to rewrite everything.
They have to rewrite the fundamental logic of their software from the ground up, which takes years.
So the Trump administration realized that by selling the H200 to China, they were actually keeping Chinese developers locked into a U.S.-led ecosystem.
Exactly.
But they didn't just open the floodgates, they implemented a quota system. China couldn't buy more than 50% of what U.S. customers were buying, and crucially, they slapped a 25% tariff on the chip.
And the stated strategy there was to tax the Chinese buyers and use that revenue to fund domestic American tech research.
Which sounds clever.
Right, the implementation is critical. The 25% was paid to the U.S. government at the time of initial import into the U.S. before the chips were re-exported to buyers in China. It was a bold attempt at geopolitical game theory.
Forcing a rival to fund your own innovation because they're so desperate for your hardware?
Exactly.
But wait, if the U.S. strategy was to take a 25% cut to fund American tech, didn't that whole strategy just backfire completely?
It backfired in spectacular fashion.
Yeah.
In January 2026, the Chinese government suddenly suspended imports of the H200.
Just completely stopped them.
Yeah. Chinese tech giants like Alibaba and ByteDance had placed billions of dollars in orders, but Beijing ordered customs to stop the shipments. They cited intense paranoia about national security, fears that the U.S. was embedding hidden backdoors or location tracking into the physical silicon. But fundamentally, it was a refusal to accept the terms of the dependency.
Right. Beijing looked at the long-term strategic map and just called the U.S. bluff.
Exactly. They realized that accepting the H200 under a 25% tariff meant subsidizing America's next-generation lead while remaining permanently addicted to the CUDA ecosystem.
So they chose cold turkey withdrawal.
They did. They accepted the short-term pain of slower AI development to force their domestic industry to become entirely self-reliant, and it completely nullified the tariff revenue strategy.
Which brings us to today, Thursday, May 14th, 2026. This is not historical analysis. The fallout from everything we just talked about is happening right now.
Yes, live reporting from Beijing, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are holding a high-stakes, face-to-face summit.
And the diplomatic statements coming out of the Chinese Foreign Ministry are incredibly tense. Xi Jinping delivered a stark warning to the U.S. delegation regarding Taiwan.
He did. He stated that if the Taiwan issue is mishandled, the two nations could collide, pushing their relationship into a, quote, very dangerous place.
And he specifically invoked the Thucydides trap. For anyone rusty on their ancient Greek history, that's a theory based on the Peloponnesian War.
Between Athens and Sparta.
Right. It suggests that when a rapidly rising power threatens to displace an established ruling power, structural stress makes violent conflict almost inevitable.
Invoking that by name in a diplomatic summit is about as serious as it gets. It underscores the true weight of the semiconductor industry.
Because of Taiwan.
Exactly. Taiwan isn't just a political talking point, it is the physical center of gravity for the entire global tech economy. The vast majority of the world's most advanced chips, including those Nvidia H200s, are physically manufactured in factories in Taiwan.
So if military conflict erupts across the Taiwan Strait, the global supply chain for AI hardware doesn't just slow down, it stops completely.
It stops.
Yeah.
And the diplomatic chess game goes far beyond Taiwan, too. They're actively negotiating the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East.
Yeah, the live reporting suggests the U.S. is using this summit to pressure China into reining in Iran's military actions in the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. With the U.S. and Israel actively bombing Iranian targets, the strait is effectively paralyzed, which is a massive threat to global energy markets.
Yeah. It's all connected. China is Iran's closest geopolitical ally and the largest buyer of their oil.
And the White House readout indicates that Xi Jinping offered a compromise.
Yeah.
China will purchase more American oil to reduce its dependence on the Strait of Hormuz, thereby lessening the economic pressure on the region.
It's a masterclass in trading economic leverage for geopolitical stability. But I want to take a step back and look at the guest list for the summit today because the optics are just surreal.
Oh, the guest list is amazing.
The U.S. delegation isn't just diplomats and military brass. Trump brought a massive contingent of American CEOs to aggressively push for market access. Tim Cook from Apple is there.
Right.
But the two names that really jump off the page are Elon Musk and Jensen Huang.
It is the ultimate convergence of our entire deep dive sitting in one room.
Okay, let's unpack this collision of interests here. You have Elon Musk, who is actively waging a vicious multi-million-dollar legal war in federal court against OpenAI for abandoning its nonprofit mission.
Yes.
Sitting a few seats away is Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, whose proprietary chips are the lifeblood of OpenAI's models, but whose products are currently sitting blocked at Chinese customs.
It's incredible.
They're both in the Great Hall of the People right now, sitting alongside the U.S. president, listening to Xi Jinping issue warnings about the Thucydides trap and global war. You could not write a script with a higher concentration of conflicting power.
You really couldn't. It perfectly encapsulates how the pursuit of artificial intelligence has completely transcended software engineering.
It's so much bigger than that now.
It is. And if we bring this massive, complex web of information back to you, the listener, the fundamental takeaway is this. The AI you interact with on your phone or the chatbot you use to summarize documents is not just a clever piece of code.
Right.
It is the foundational resource of the 21st century. It's the new electrical grid.
It's the underlying infrastructure of the new global economy.
Exactly. The race to build it is rewriting the foundations of corporate law and testing the very limits of charitable trusts. It's the catalyst for multi-billion-dollar tariff policies that are redesigning global supply chains.
Yep.
And it's actively being used as leverage in military conflicts across the Middle East and the Taiwan Strait. Every time you type a prompt into an AI model, you are interacting with a technology that the most powerful people on Earth are risking global stability to control.
Right now, we are watching a furious battle among billionaires, corporations, and global superpowers. They are fighting over the physical chips, the proprietary code, and the astronomical profit caps.
That's a gold rush.
But let's look forward for a second and leave you with this final thought. Let's say one of these labs actually achieves their goal. They build true artificial general intelligence, an entity that is significantly smarter than any human being alive.
Okay.
Will any of this current fighting actually matter? Will a $250 billion corporate cap or a legal trust document written in 2015 or a 25% U.S. export tariff mean anything to a superintelligence?
That's the real question.
When the machine finally wakes up and outsmarts us all, who is actually going to be in control?
That is the ultimate unknown of this entire arms race. And it's a question none of these legal or geopolitical maneuvers can answer.
It really is the million dollar, or I guess the $250 billion question. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you scroll through the news coming out of the Beijing summit today, keep all of this in mind. When you plant an apple seed, you might expect a tree. But in the world of AI, the roots are spreading faster, deeper, and with far more destructive force than anyone could have ever predicted. We'll catch you next time.